This video is brought to you by my good friends at Bellesa. Stay tuned for more information about our massive giveaway. It has, though I didn't predict it ahead of time, become Pop Star Month over here on the Okie Dokie YouTube Videos YouTube channel. First, we spoke about Sabrina Carpenter, her house tour music video, and the accusations that her female-directed, female-starring music video was pandering to the male gaze. And then, many of the same people who were angry at her moved on to being mad at 23-year-old Olivia Rodrigo for her most recent music video. But the accusations being wielded against Olivia were just different enough that it too felt like something I ought to address. I have another Pop Girlie video on the docket soon. It should surprise nobody to know that the reason I haven't spoken about the most recent Chapel Roan fiasco is not because of a lack of things to say, but because of a struggle to pin down how to say everything that I would like to say about that entire situation. The more I care about a video, the longer it takes me to finish. So, if you're in line for Lacy Green Part 2, stay in line. I'm so sorry. It's just that in order to talk about Lacy Green, I have to talk about Gamergate, and I've been having a mental health episode of sorts for the last few months, and I can only pile so much on top of that, which is why it's become Pop Girly Month over here. The thing about talking about Sabrina Carpenter and then Olivia Rodrigo in such quick succession is that it becomes pretty immediately obvious that there's a missing link between these two conversations. And it might be a missing link you were waiting for me to address. It was a missing link I was trying to figure out how to address myself. But then I found myself having to ask, which video do I address that link in? Which woman do I segue out of defending in order to relitigate relationship drama that is, by this point, nearly half a decade old? How could I possibly do that in a way that is respectful to the art either one of them is making? And this is likely clear by now, but I do think that taking that analysis seriously, looking at the output of these pop stars and being sincere in my critical examination of the work itself is important, even though so much of what I do can be an attempt at pinning these women down into whatever current strains of ideology they represent in the discourse they bring about. I still think that that's important, and I don't think that this is art that you have to like or art that you have to class as inherently feminist in and of itself. While I think some of the individual actions of both Olivia Rodrigo and Sabrina Carpenter are pretty easy for me to hail as feminist, I'd be pretty hard-pressed to find a pop star or a celebrity who I could class as uncomplicatedly capital F feminist in the entirety of their output and cultural impact. I do, however, think, whether it's feminist art or not, that it's art, and that it deserves to be analyzed as such, and that to do so, to take these women seriously as artists and engage with their work not through the think of the children lens so many people want to catastrophize whatever latest music video through, but in the context of the rest of their body of work, the way we analyze art by men, I do think that itself is a feminist aim, yeah. And considering that I'm not entirely sure how much airtime a mutual ex-girlfriend would get in a video where two men who were famous in the same sphere were mentioned, the compromise I landed on was that I would discuss each of them without addressing that missing link. This felt more ideologically aligned with a feminist analysis of the current discourses around them than something that made that big of a digression would be. But that digression has continued to call to me the more I've been thinking about these two, even after I made a Patreon companion to my initial Sabrina video that was largely about this. As should be evidenced by me making videos defending both Sabrina and Olivia, I like both of these women. Liking and defending both of these women is totally an option, and a pretty good one at that. In no way do I want this video to be taken as an attempt at reigniting any beef or drama. I'm telling this story in order to make some points about the ways that their fandoms and the fandoms of pop stars in general function, and the way that that works to the detriment of our discourse. Sabrina's even been at one of Olivia's shows recently. Don't come here to do Stan War shit. These two seem to be on just fine terms now, and liking women does not have to be a competitive sport. Today's video is not one that will ask you to make any sort of choice between these two women. This video is, however, sponsored by my good friends at Bellesa. If you've already been here for a while, you definitely already know how much I love Bellesa. They are a bi-woman company for all things sexual wellness with a mission to empower everyone to embrace, explore, and celebrate their sexuality. I'm so excited to be partnering with them again. I really feel like they are such a perfect fit for the Nuance Corner, and they are so generous. We are literally sending out free toys or gift cards for toys to everyone who signs up to my giveaway using the link in the description below. And there are all sorts of toys you might be interested in. For example, the Rose toy. You're likely already familiar with this one. It is a viral TikTok sensation. It comes with 10 different modes and fits perfectly in the palm of your hand to provide you complete control of your pleasure. It's also so cute and so discreet. I mean, look at it. It literally looks like a rose. Or maybe you'd be interested in the Pebble, which has both suction and vibration controlled independently and is ergonomically built to fit perfectly in your hand. But my personal favorite thing about this and so many of Bellessa's other toys is that they don't waste your time with any annoying pattern modes you'll never use. This is something I think makes it very obvious that Bellessa is a bi-woman company. But maybe, like me, you already have all of these. In which case, allow me to introduce you to their latest offering, the Air Max. This one is not a trend, it's a benchmark. Air Max sets the new standard for suction toys. Pure airwave performance, channeling full air pulse power into a sleek handheld design. No vibrations, no distractions, just refined airwave technology that delivers deep rhythmic stimulation. It has a seamless silicone mouth to create a smooth, comfortable seal for consistent suction, and the ergonomic sculpted handle is designed for effortless control from any angle. It's also quiet, but still very powerful without sacrificing any of the intensity of the suction. If you're thirsty to try any of these toys or anything else from Bellessa, check out the link in my description or pinned comment below. Everyone who signs up for my giveaway will win a free toy or gift card for a toy. Thanks so much to Bellessa for sponsoring this and so many other videos on the channel. Let's get back to it, shall we? Sabrina Carpenter and Olivia Rodrigo actually have enough in common that I would argue a video discussing both of them and their work, even without any of the interpersonal drama we unfortunately have to get into, would be merited. They are both in this new upcoming generation of pop stars, squarely Gen Z, where many of our prior famous faves have been millennial or older. They both have a ton of clear and obvious influences, by whom they're generally regarded pretty fondly. I've argued before, many times now, for the understanding of Sabrina Carpenter's stage persona as a character. She puts on this pop star performance, does this sort of straight drag gender theater, and like many drag queens, her influences are old Hollywood icons and film stars, or like Dolly Parton, obviously. And I say this not as any sort of slight against Sabrina Carpenter, but this performance she puts on sort of puts her into archetype territory, which I think leads to, as I discussed in the Patreon content, people constructing these little 5 feet tall straw women, where they react not just to Sabrina, but to what they've decided Sabrina must represent to others. Sabrina Carpenter, as all pop stars, as all celebrities and famous figures in general, represents a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But what I've found, the more time I've spent thinking about Sabrina Carpenter, which all told has been a shocking amount this past year or so, is that I feel the people who are hardest on her are responding not just to what she represents to them, but to what they are assuming she represents to other people. That's a little Patreon preview. I already warned them over there when I uploaded that I would likely be stripping that video for parts in a future main channel video about Olivia. It's just that I've already made that argument once about Sabrina playing a character and it impacting how she's reacted to, so I really didn't want to have to make it again. And I would also argue that Olivia is just as much playing a character. It's just that the character she plays is flavored a little bit less sex pot and a little bit more rocker girl. It's a feature, not a bug, of Olivia Rodrigo that she sort of tumbles away the rougher edges of her clear influences and produces a more polished pop version of it. I've seen a lot of people try to act like Olivia is some sort of poser, but I think it's always been fairly clear that Olivia Rodrigo is a rock star flavored pop star rather than a pop flavored rock star. And because of all of this, with them both clearly playing characters, in addition to them both being such young, successful, referential artists, with them sharing this obvious love of music, these similarly high effort music videos, just generally being two touring and charting artists who are famous at the same time, I think comparisons and competition between the two would have ended up being invoked either way. And I also think it's pretty unfortunate that the most common ways those get drawn is this collective Bechdel fail. And so, despite the fact that, yeah, they dated the same guy, and we'll get to that eventually, let me spend a little bit more time talking about all the reasons it feels so natural to put these two in conversation together. Something else Olivia Rodrigo and Sabrina Carpenter have in common is a childhood as a Disney star. Sabrina was in Girl Meets World, a Disney reboot of Boy Meets World, in which she played the scrappy neighbor child of Cory and Topanga's daughter. And Olivia Rodrigo was in Bizaardvark, which was apparently a Disney Channel show that starred a Paul brother, which feels like information my brain just refuses to retain, because I swear I've learned this like 4 times and I felt shocked every time. That's not actually either of their first acting credits, and it's not the last thing that either of them would do before reaching widespread mainstream success with their music, but it is another obvious comparison between the two, and a thing that I think impacts how both of them are viewed. They're far from the first former Disney kids or former child actors to experience a backlash when they attempted to actually mature after growing up in the public eye. They're just the most recent, and I think maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps the first time that we've seen this happen with Gen Z former child stars. Is that what it is? Why these two in particular seem like such frontrunners in the discourse lately? Seriously, weigh in the comments. But either way, much like many former Disney pop girlies before them, it has been a long road to people's current reactions to their adulthood. Sabrina Carpenter has had a bit more of an extended trajectory in this area than Olivia, if only by right of being a few years older and more established. The first few albums Sabrina Carpenter released were through Hollywood Records, which is where Disney Channel signs all the pop stars they try to produce, but only a few of them actually get the attention they need to succeed. And though Sabrina got a few tries, I really don't get the feeling the mouse was pouring Hannah Montana money into boosting Sabrina when she wasn't in one of the shows where they were banking on selling tie-in albums. And she didn't really begin to age herself up until the Emails I Can't Send era. A lot of the eye rolling about her raunchy nonsense outros on that tour was chalked up to it being because she had been a former Disney kid. Olivia is experiencing that backlash right now in a way I really feel did not hit my radar before, even though I personally felt like she aged herself up slightly with the promo for Guts. One of the big radio singles from that era was explicitly a song about hooking up with your ex. But maybe because of the differences in her styling, or maybe just because of the positioning of the narrator in Bad Idea Right as someone who is preemptively regretting the sex they're about to have, that's more respectable to some people than the positioning of a Sabrina narrator who enjoys sex or is being funny and cheeky. I didn't see the kind of outrage about Bad Idea Right as I have about some of Sabrina's work, which is not to say it didn't happen. It's just to say that I feel like this didn't start happening so much for Olivia until the Drop Dead music video when, as we discussed in my last upload, people decided she was self-infantilizing and all of that. Which, and I didn't mention this in the last video because I felt like I already had enough to say and I was trying to keep it under an hour, but isn't there something so goddamn ironic about that? To infantilize a woman and then accuse her of infantilizing herself despite the fact that she hasn't done anything other than be a grown adult you have issues with? Just a kick in the teeth. God, I'm still so annoyed by that whole discourse. Sometimes I can put something away after I'm finished talking about it, but I have stayed riled up about this for weeks now. Which is why I know so much about Olivia Rodrigo. Like, that though her first record deal was with a big girl record label who would allow her to own her own masters and swear in her music, a lot of people were introduced to her music through the mouse. Bizaardvark was a musical show, and then the one I was familiar with, more freshly between that and the beginning of her pop star career, Olivia Rodrigo starred in High School Musical, the series. I bring this up now because it will matter later, but it won't be on the test. It would be really cool if all these actual similarities were the basis on which Sabrina and Olivia come up in conversation together. Like, I genuinely think the differences in the ways in which they've been allowed to engage with their sexuality so far in the public eye is pretty fascinating to examine. And I know from my viewer metrics that I'm not alone in being fascinated by former child stars, because y'all tend to tune in for those videos. I think the fact that Olivia and Sabrina both have such clear references and appreciation for the history of the space they exist in is awesome. And I even honestly think a little bit of a healthy rivalry could be a fun thing. Not in a pitting women against each other sort of way, but just in terms of how neat it is that there's so much fun and high effort pop music all coming out at the same time. But unfortunately, we do live in the society we live in. So the conversations that are had around Olivia Rodrigo and Sabrina Carpenter always sort of have to have these other layers of context heaped onto them. First of all, the presupposition that a rivalry couldn't be fun and healthy, that there would only be so much success up for grabs and one of them garnering acclaim automatically blocks the other one from achieving it. Second of all, moral value judgments being made about the inherent worth of their respective art, rather than just understanding that some things come down to personal taste and preferences. And third of all, as happens so frustratingly often in conversations around women and their art, it's made to be about a man. Allow me to open this next chapter by saying I feel slightly guilty for accepting any credit for repeating the phrase paternity testing in my last video to describe the act of assigning a male muse as the credit for a woman's art without a clear citation. Not that I expect anyone not at least knee-deep in Taylor Swift lore to know that that came from her. I did not come up with that. And really, it makes total sense for Taylor Swift to have been the source of such a phrase because that is so the way her music is consumed and has been consumed for much of her career. I bring it and Taylor Swift up in this context because whatever conversations might be had about the ways Taylor Swift herself might have played into that method of interpreting music aside, it is inarguably a way that music seems to be widely consumed now. There's this, I think, increasingly normalized hyper-literal sort of interpretation that happens with pop music, and as I discussed in my Gaylor video, though it's very normalized to do when it comes to straight relationships and those dynamics, it tends to only be the queer people doing these kind of interpretations who get smacked for it. I've been seeing these literal interpretations in things like joking tweets about not being able to take new Phoebe Bridgers songs seriously if you think about them as being about Bo Burnham, and as we all know more and more about each other because of social media and exceptionally skilled PR teams, it feels like it's increasingly the normalized way to consume and talk about music. Particularly the sort of singer-songwriter pop music that everyone in this conversation writes, which was already a genre prone to including some level of specifics and literality. In Olivia's new song, for example, she sings about a Pisces and a Gemini and their supposed compatibility, something that didn't strike me as remotely odd up until I was reading Reddit threads about Olivia for the baby doll video, and I got to somebody lamenting how they don't like that singers are now apparently suddenly Easter egging their relationships in songs. Another thing I have not been able to stop thinking about over the last few weeks. It's not that people didn't used to sing about their boyfriends, baby. It's that you didn't know enough about the boyfriends to put together who they were. If you hadn't been served clickbait headlines and engagement bait social media posts about Olivia Rodrigo's real life, you would have been able to enjoy it in the way you enjoy whatever music you aren't forced to be at least proxy parasocial about. You know, the way you are about Taylor Swift, whether you like her or not, and the way you are kind of asked to be about any other woman the media ecosystem thinks they can Taylor Swift about when it comes to assigning love interest speculation to songs. I also bring Taylor Swift up because she's pretty inseparable from the Olivia Rodrigo and Sabrina Carpenter conversation herself, and we can spend a little longer before we start talking about a guy. Olivia Rodrigo's first single, Driver's License, debuted when she was only 17 years old, and it was immediately a breakout success. She was already famous from her Disney projects, of course, which couldn't have hurt, but I also don't want to minimize that Driver's License is just a really good song. It's a very confessional sort of ballad, the kind of first heartbreak song that feels very much like a glimpse into a teen girl's diary. That's something else I talked about in that Patreon video. I said, much of Olivia's work strikes this tone, a young woman sharing her diary with you, being vulnerable and poetic and personal and confessional. A lot of interviewers during Olivia's press for Driver's License and then the album it was from, Sour, brought up the fairly obvious Taylor Swift influences, given Olivia's age. Yes, Olivia Rodrigo was a Taylor Swift fan. Yes, she saw Taylor Swift as an inspiration for her songwriting. Yes, the websites hosting these interviews would get the most clicks if, no matter what else Olivia might have had to say in an interview, the platform capitalized on the headline that they could reference Taylor Swift in. In my observation, this led to a few fallout effects. For one, some overprotective Swifties didn't like the idea of another singer-songwriter doing what they were, I think, unfairly seeing as riding Taylor's coattails, trying to get famous on her name, etc., etc. Oh, hey, was somebody saying something about infantilization? Because I would say that the overprotective nature of some Swifties towards Taylor absolutely strikes me as closer toward infantilization than anything Olivia wore in the promotion for Drop Dead, but I guess those are conversations of treating an adult woman like a child versus an adult woman dressing in a way I could throw my back out, stretching to pretend is childish, so it's not really a fair comparison. Another fallout effect, as I also discussed in that aforementioned Patreon video, is that Olivia claiming Taylor so much at the beginning of her career meant that, at least for a time, Taylor claimed her right back. For as many early career headlines as Olivia Rodrigo had about referencing or loving Taylor Swift, and there were many, there seemed to be just as many about Taylor embracing her right back, writing Olivia a letter and gifting her with a ring like the one she wore when she wrote her Red album. Olivia Rodrigo was, for a time, and my god, I envy those of you to whom this will make no sense, Tay-daughter, a younger pop star being seen as a sort of successor to Taylor, widely loved and adopted by those fans who weren't feeling overprotective in a way that drew them to side-eye a then 17-year-old for being a fan of one of the most culturally relevant musicians of our time, as pretty much every young woman in her age demographic is or was at some point. That's actually yet another thing Olivia and Sabrina have in common, other than the ex-boyfriend. Both the label of Tay-daughter and their lifelong love of Taylor Swift, who they would later go on to meet once they had music careers of their own. And okay, maybe I'm lingering on the Taylor Swift of it all since I want to just not talk about the love triangle yet, but I promise Taylor remains really relevant here. And not just because I think it's clever to talk about both her and Sabrina Carpenter in my section titled That Blonde Girl, but also not because of that. Sabrina Carpenter and Olivia Rodrigo have both posted covers of Taylor Swift songs online. Sabrina's when she was a teeny tiny child, Olivia's in 2020, which garnered her the first of those many Taylor notices I mentioned earlier. Olivia covered Cruel Summer, and Taylor, who was very much more active on social media during that time, reposted it, which Olivia was obviously super excited about. It's easy to forget about now, considering how much distance has grown between them over the last couple of years, but for a while there, during Olivia's very quick rise to prominence, she and Taylor were being super closely linked. When Taylor wanted to promote her Fearless re-recording, she gave copies to Olivia and her friend Conan Gray to make content with. When Olivia posted about being excited to be on the Billboard charts next to Taylor Swift, Taylor commented and called her her baby and said she was really proud. And it would be hard to overstate the amount to which Olivia Rodrigo was a Taylor Swift fan. She had Taylor Swift as her lock screen on her phone. She talked about it all the time in interviews. It was a whole big thing. To be honest, part of that skepticism I mentioned earlier that some of the fandom would have toward Olivia Rodrigo felt very much to me at the time like it was jealousy, because all of this was, for a while, seemingly all someone who had grown up being a fan of Taylor Swift could really hope for. I think people would have made the comparison between Olivia Rodrigo and Taylor Swift either way, even if she hadn't confirmed that she was a Swiftie, considering the similarities in their songwriting styles, the diaristic tone, as well as these big climactic bridges. And despite how some Swifties would act about it later, it really wasn't ever Olivia's fault that she was getting Taylor-related headlines. It's not like Olivia has any control over what part of her answers to an interviewer's 40 seconds of questions on a red carpet would make it to the clickbait headline that some outlet that wants your ad traffic would spin out later. I shouldn't exaggerate how many Swifties already had a grudge against Olivia Rodrigo during her rise. I suspect, like most bad behavior I observe in Swifties, this was coming from a small but vocal minority. Because, for the most part, another thing Taylor Swift's early adoption of Olivia Rodrigo meant was that, though there was, of course, already an existing Olivia Rodrigo fandom from her days on Disney Channel and High School Musical, the series, a lot of Olivia Rodrigo's very early and very dedicated fans were also Swifties. Maybe this would have happened either way. I imagine a lot of the people who were invested in High School Musical, the series, were already Swifties just by right of demographic. That show was made for theater kids, and what are Swifties, really, but theater kids by another name? And what that appeal to Swifties means, this sort of inter-pop star fandom library loan that Taylor did of some of her fans, flooding her audience into Olivia's in a way that I'm sure is probably among one of the biggest career blessings a young pop star could hope for. It means that the way Olivia Rodrigo's music would then go on to be widely interpreted is very, very predictable. And this would start happening with Olivia's very first single, Driver's License, which would be, as Taylor Swift put it, paternity tested. And it was paternity tested in particular to Joshua Bassett, Olivia Rodrigo's co-star and love interest in High School Musical, the series. As I've already said, there was an existing Olivia Rodrigo fan base, which means that there was an existing fan base for both Olivia and Joshua Bassett as a couple, even though, as far as I know, they never actually confirmed their relationship at the time. There is plenty of evidence, if you poke around online, that people were chronicling their rumored relationship, which I just want to note again, Olivia was a teenager at the time, and while I'm sure a lot of the people who were big invested into this were also teenagers, it just feels so weird and pathetic for me to be delving into this as a big 27-year-old. Like, I feel pretty ideologically opposed to even knowing the details of all of this, which is another reason why I cut this digression from my other videos about Olivia and Sabrina. There are clickbait articles and gossip videos and plenty of other places you can go if your interest in the connection between these two is to gawk at whatever pieces of information we have about a half-decade-old breakup between a bunch of people who were extremely young at the time. But all you really need to know for the sake of the conversation are the following highlights. Olivia Rodrigo was connected to Joshua Bassett, who she was in a High School Musical, the series with, and he would later date Sabrina Carpenter, who would be identified by listeners of Olivia's breakout hit as that blonde girl who Olivia's narrator surmises the boyfriend she broke up with must be with. What we do hear about that blonde girl isn't particularly mean. She's blonde, obviously. She always made the narrator doubt. She is so much older than the narrator and is everything the narrator is insecure about. Honestly, it's a fairly complimentary description, at least neutral, I would say, but I think pretty complimentary. But we know that fan bases do not interpret songs that way when they can identify someone who they think is being described as anything like an obstacle to their favorite. And so Sabrina Carpenter, off of Girl Meets World by now, but yet to release the first of what I consider her big girl albums, was identified and crucified as that blonde girl. Something that I really truly do not consider to be Olivia Rodrigo's fault. Something that I think was a shitty way for people to rush to mass interpret a song that is generous and confessional and sincere the way that the Driver's License is. Revisiting this and remembering that Olivia was only 17, it's genuinely impressive, especially because Sabrina's first attempt at a comeback to this was less mature. Though I'm sure it's hard to think especially straight when someone's career is blowing up over a song where you're referenced, so while I think Sabrina's initial response track was misguided and more than a little embarrassing, I'm also willing to say that since she and Olivia seemed to be fine, I'm not going to hold a grudge about it. Sabrina's other song about this experience, Because I Liked a Boy, is much more sympathetic, and it does seem like it would be a real mindfuck to get a bunch of harassment over a relationship that was already over by the time anyone even learned they were parasocially angry about it. But unfortunately, and in my opinion, through no real fault of Olivia, this was a lot of people's first introduction to Sabrina Carpenter. My own included, and I've wondered sometimes, including in that Patreon video I made on the subject, whether that colored my initial perceptions of Sabrina Carpenter in a way I wasn't quite able to identify, because even I need the reminder sometimes that liking women is not a competitive sport. While I feel Sabrina has largely recovered from the reputational damage from this incident and people being weird as fuck about her because of it, there is a part of me that wonders what sort of lasting damage might have happened to people's perception of her just from maybe being introduced to her in this way, even if they would never tell you that they were truly invested in a 5-year-old love triangle between former Disney kids. Was this part of why I myself had some of these preconceived negative notions about Sabrina? Even though I would have assured you I cared very little about all of this as it was going down. How sure can I be, especially in a culture that regards cheating and anything that they can make be shaped like cheating as more unforgivable than actual for real violent abuse, that my thoughts on Sabrina Carpenter weren't based on ambient other woman misogyny, or due to the fact that I quite like Olivia Rodrigo, and that her beautiful coming-of-age ballad invited me so strongly to sympathize with her that, in my misogyny-addled brain, on a more subconscious level than I did when I repeated this same pattern with Chapel Roan, I just could not see a way to root for one woman without finding another woman to pit her against. To Olivia's credit, she's actually never confirmed that the song was about Sabrina Carpenter. In fact, early draft of the lyrics suggest a brunette girl instead, and Blonde was changed in at the suggestion of Olivia's collaborator. And Olivia has never directly confirmed that Driver's License is about Joshua Bassett, or by extension, Sabrina Carpenter, who he did briefly date. I mean, she spoke in interviews while they were together about him teaching her to drive, so it's not the hugest stretch, and she is very generous about speculation in interviews, saying she understands the curiosity, but that she thinks who a given song was written about is the least interesting part of her songs. And I think that's more than fair. I wish more people understood specificity in songwriting as like an offer for additional emotional resonancy and not as open season to go be as weird as you want to be to anyone who you think was involved with the situation the song is about. Everything I've just told you about this relationship, as vague and non-specific as I was about it, that's really just the public lore surrounding this. The RPF that you haven't internalized as RPF because it happens on magazine covers and not AO3. It all very well could be true. I mean, Sabrina feeling called to respond to Driver's License feels for a lot of people like it confirms her role in all of this as that blonde girl. And I think even if she hadn't originally been that when Olivia wrote the song, she has culturally become that figure. That blonde girl in opposition to Olivia and her narrator. And you might think that the biggest driver of all this rivalry between Sabrina Carpenter and Olivia Rodrigo is because of the love triangle stuff. And once again, I would forgive you for thinking so long as you're not waist-deep in Taylor Swift lore. Because the truth is, Joshua Bassett hardly matters to this conversation. I think he was doing some kind of podcast tour for a memoir while I was researching this video, and that was entirely too far of a tangent for me to go off on, even in this tangential video, because no real offense meant to Joshua Bassett, I don't even hold any hard feelings toward him. But he doesn't truly matter to this narrative anymore, other than for the fact that he dated and was associated with both of these women about half a decade ago. Like I keep coming back to with Olivia and Sabrina, what matters here is what Josh represents. And I think for some people, this driver's license love triangle, sure, something started here. This feeling of rooting for Sabrina as an underdog, the woman who got a bad reputation for not really doing anything wrong, considering that the narrator of Olivia's song had already broken up with the love interest by the time they got together with the blonde girl. I maintain, most people who at this point are having the strongest opinions about Sabrina Carpenter and Olivia Rodrigo, I don't think they're primarily motivated by their feelings about this love triangle. While I think this situation colors and haunts the narrative between the two of them, it feels like something Olivia and Sabrina have also grown beyond, or maybe grown around, like when a tree twists up around a bicycle. Because at this point, the driver's license of it all is far from the only relevant lore here. And there's my other reason for spending so much time on the Taylor Swift stuff. Because while I understand how you could end up siding with either woman in this situation, the divide I really truly don't understand is the one where the Swifties got involved here. And I've spent quite a bit of time trying to dig into that, trying to rationalize it with that jealousy I feel some Swifties had when Olivia Rodrigo was seemingly the favored child of Taylor Swift. It comes down to that, and I think also something else that I feel a need to slap a massive disclaimer onto before we even talk about it. We know almost nothing about this situation. Anyone speaking to you about this with any more certainty is bullshitting you. I need to get that out of the way before we can move on to what this really is, which is not so much love triangle drama these days as it is full-on pop girly wars. The lack of reliable information about this feels like an important thing to note in the midst of this story. A lot of people say with a lot of confidence that Taylor Swift sued Olivia Rodrigo over songwriting credits for two of her songs. This is not, according to anything I've seen in my research for this video, actually true. What really happened is this. Among a press tour that, as I've mentioned, included a lot of loving references to Taylor Swift, it was announced that Taylor Swift would be granted a songwriting credit on one of Olivia's ballads, credited as an interpolation. There was yet more positive Taylor-Olivia press around this for the song One Step Forward, Three Steps Back. This isn't what people are ever talking about. The thing that's most often pointed to as the beginning of a very obvious distancing between Taylor and Olivia is when Taylor was granted additional songwriting credits, which happened after the album was already out and was part of granting songwriting credits to a host of other musicians, including St. Vincent and Paramore. This happened in 2 rounds. First, Paramore's Hayley Williams and ex-guitarist Josh Farro getting retroactive credits on the song Good For You, which my friend who is very into Paramore has informed me is because of the shitty Christian ex-guitarist and not because of Hayley. And then roughly about a month later, Taylor Swift, Jack Antonoff, and St. Vincent would receive retroactive writing credits for Deja Vu based on Cruel Summer, based on the very common chord patterns and also probably more concretely the songs Olivia had spoken about being inspired by. I do still think, especially after the sort of public narrative we've all been through with Taylor Swift over the last few years regarding her masters, the fact that she didn't say anything when this all happened is shitty. I think it would have been really cool of her to deny that Olivia should owe her royalties, maybe make a big point of donating the money to new musicians studying music or something. Instead, for a few months, neither of them said anything about it at all, which allowed for rumors to fester. When you try to look deeply enough into this to retell it with any real specifics, you just find headline after headline after headline of Olivia promising that there is no feud. She is not beefing with Taylor. She blames Twitter conspiracy theories for people thinking that there's some big narrative going on here. She has spoken in interviews about the whole song credit thing being a learning experience for her. She was a little caught off guard when Taylor's team asked for writing credits on Deja Vu. At the time, it was very confusing, and I was green and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Is that the phrase? It's not something that I was super involved in. It was more team on team, so I wouldn't be the best person to ask. On top of that, she says, I don't think I would ever personally do that, but who's to say where I'll be in 20, 30 years? All that I can do is write my songs and focus on what I can control. Which, like a lot about Olivia, honestly impresses me with her maturity, and so does the way she talked about it when she spoke about this to Time, saying that it was really frustrating to see people discredit and deny her creativity and the way young women are constantly compared to each other. Like I said before, she was getting a lot of Taylor Swift comparisons, and I cannot imagine how stifling that would be, even if all of this royalty stuff had not happened. But unfortunately for Olivia, it did. And as I've mentioned, their relationship has been very publicly strained to non existent ever since, with a recent exception for them both attending a Paul McCartney party. And Taylor, for her part, as is so often my problem with her, well, she hasn't really said much of anything, which, as we should know by now, leaves a lot of room for narratives to form. Like that it wasn't a team on team thing, that Taylor specifically sought out Olivia to sue her. I don't know that that's the case, and I also don't know that that's not the case, because, like I said, would have been pretty easy and morally consistent for Taylor Swift to fucking say something, but it seems like she's forgotten how to do that. As I've been saying since last October, my thoughts on Taylor Swift are constantly subject to change, but just on a personal level, I really haven't been able to stomach Life of a Showgirl anymore since her lack of action when the White House used songs from it for their propaganda. A thing every other pop star in this conversation has had happen to them too, and that they dealt with immediately, even though neither of them have documentaries about how much they hate Donald Trump. And so now you have that fraction of overprotective Swifties feeling very validated. They're participating in the discourse around Olivia ripping Taylor off, or at least they're getting very defensive over the way that the idea that Taylor was the one in specific who sued or threatened to sue Olivia over the song has spread as though that was ever confirmed anywhere. And like that's not all enough. You have Taylor bringing Sabrina Carpenter on the Eras tour with her, which many people took to be Taylor switching sides belatedly in this driver's license love triangle drama. And so, yeah, sure, this is a little bit about that, but only because it turned into this whole proxy thing. There are other elements going on here too, like Paramore was another big opener for Eras, and Olivia did not attend that tour. But the Sabrina versus Olivia of it all feels like such a big thing because it's Sabrina versus Olivia, but it's also Taylor versus Olivia. It's Olivia versus that blonde girl. And how sure are we that it matters which one, so long as we have someone we can root for against her? somewhere between Taylor receiving songwriting credit on those Olivia songs and inviting Sabrina Carpenter to open for her during the Eras tour. It seems like at least some contingent of Taylor Swift fans have decided that part of standing Taylor and Sabrina means to accept being ideologically opposed to Olivia Rodrigo. We still have very little information about what went down behind the scenes with that whole songwriting credit situation. And I guess people's reaction to that depend on how convinced they are that Good For You is as derivative as some people say it is, whether they believe the songwriting credits were justified or not. But a lot of people have filled in information based on that and not based on other sort of common sense things, like that Olivia Rodrigo was blowing up on her own world tour right around the same time as Eras, which probably would have factored into whether she was invited to open or not. I mean, the two of them very well could hate each other now. I'm sure if I were Olivia Rodrigo and I had gone through that and my favorite didn't say something to support me in the middle of all of it, I would probably find a new favorite. But much like this Sabrina versus Olivia drama is largely extrapolated, save for a few mass interpreted lines from Driver's License, Skin, and Because I Liked a Boy, much of what people both inside and outside of the fandom act like is widely understood about the situation is actually just speculation. And I think a lot of what that comes down to is that phenomenon of liking a woman as a competitive sport. I think an underdiscussed pusher of misogyny in our discourse is, of course, hence the focus of this month, the pop girly wars. There has always been an Olivia versus Sabrina. There will always be an Olivia versus Sabrina. Women are pit against each other just by right of being famous at the same time, nonetheless from having had boyfriend overlap when they were extremely young. And there's something I see in this particular fandom war that I talked about for just a moment toward the end of my last video, which is this desire to allow criticisms that you don't even think are fair against your favorite, as long as they might take against another woman. You might see this, for example, in fans of Taylor Swift and Sabrina Carpenter who decry the obvious PR of Olivia Rodrigo's album rollout, when many fans of Taylor Swift are on a first-name recognition basis with Taylor Swift's publicist, Tree Payne. A comment I read about Olivia during my Reddit research for the last video had this sort of scandalized conspiratorial tone to it, telling someone who was saying that the Teen Vogue and Cosmo articles about Olivia felt like PR that Olivia actually has a really good PR team who are really good at building narratives around her, and they're so glad people are finally noticing. And I mean, I don't know for sure that that was a Taylor and or Sabrina fan, but I could take a pretty educated guess, considering all we've talked about today, at who stands to be annoyed by narratives where Olivia is the pretty obvious victim. And I could take a pretty educated guess that someone wouldn't mind saying that while also rolling their eyes at the commonly repeated take that Taylor Swift self-victimizes too much. You also see a lot of reactionary fights when you look into this, and that, honestly, more than bot activity, is what felt like it made the baby doll dress backlash difficult to parse. Were people genuinely really angry about Olivia Rodrigo's pajamas and baby doll dress? Yeah, at least some of them. Were some of the things they were upvoting and stewing in their rage about written by people who were just basking, enjoying, and seeing the kind of vitriol they usually see aimed at their favorite pointed against someone who has otherwise seemed immune to those criticisms so far? Oh, absolutely. And if you ask fans of Sabrina Carpenter, it's been Olivia Rodrigo fans who have been accusing Sabrina of self-infantilizing this whole time, so really it's only fair for things to turn around now and for them to be the one dealing with criticism of their favorite. At least half the comments I read on threads complaining about the variant checklist for Drop Dead had some version or another of, well, my favorite might do a lot of variants, but at least they've never posted a shopping list, or I don't even like so-and-so, but even they don't do this. As if every criticism of a woman must be made with word association to the closest similar hated lady, just to maximize the amount of engagement they might get by really milking the MSC of it all. I'm sure someone with a stronger stomach for snark Reddits than me could try to compile some data about what sort of other fandom threads the people most active in Sabrina Carpenter and Chapel Roan snark boards participate in. They could try to map it out some, but even in situations like this, where there's the obvious rivalry of Sabrina versus Olivia, you have these extremely tangential side characters coming in, like Taylor Swift, where it requires so much lore to even understand why she matters, but she still affects the way people side in a given discourse, even when the thing that comes up in that discourse is something that these people would usually find pretty deeply unfair. So much of the defense I saw of Olivia, including some under my own video about Sabrina, where a couple of people were discussing the Olivia controversy before I covered it, involved pointing at other women who they wanted to blame of so-called pedo-baiting instead. Ariana Grande, Sabrina Carpenter, whoever is going to get branded as a sexy baby next month and thus be deemed unlikable and unworthy of our respect. And the thing is, I guess it makes sense to me. Just like my urge to pit Sabrina Carpenter against Chappell Roan in my head. I can understand that urge to say, but you don't get mad when she does it about someone when you can tell that the person talking about them is being unfair. And I've fallen for this too. It was not the right move during Life of a Showgirl discourse, I'll tell you that much. But the thing is, someone is typically always mad when that other woman does it. Or at least they're willing to agree to get angry about it once somebody tells them to be. And when it's just a matter of time until this ever-shrinking spiral circles back around with tighter and tighter restrictions for what's allowable, it's really past time to think about what discourses you are agreeing to when you participate in them. If your favorite pop star is not pedo-baiting, but another woman is, then there are women who can tempt men into committing heinous assault against children. And if you don't believe that, it is not a thing you should accuse a woman of. If your favorite is not playing the victim by writing stories about her own life, but another woman is, then people's right to express their life in the music they make is based on how subjectively empathetic they are. And I hope you don't have any art you'd like to create, because I'm pretty sure at least somebody in your life does not like you if you're the kind of person who spends your time up to the waist in pop star snark Reddits, even if it's just me. If your favorite having variants is excusable because the record label probably decides all of that, then you probably shouldn't act like the pop star it's trendiest to hate next month personally signed off on all 9 million variants in Orphan Blood. And I know a lot of people are going to want to pretend like all negative behavior toward Olivia Rodrigo is squarely as a result of Swifties and Sabrina fans, or of Swifties turning on Sabrina when it's against Sabrina, but I want to be clear that I really don't think that's the case. I'm sure that there are people who hate everyone involved and who participate equally in whatever smear campaign comes their way. I don't think this is something that can be pinned on Swifties, just like I don't think it's something that can be pinned on bots, because I don't think it's even necessarily just about Olivia and Sabrina. I think it's all of us. I think this is the way our discourse functions, and it's broken. I guess increasingly that just sort of feels like the point of these videos I make is just to point out that the discourse is broken. If you feel like you've been noticing it get worse and worse lately, you're not alone. I think so too, and so does much of my audience. Which I know because I so often hear something like, "Thanks for being normal about women," which I really appreciate and also feel very saddened by. It really sucks that in big 2026, managing to carve out little niches on the internet where you're surrounded by people who genuinely care about women is something that takes such effort. It really sucks that in big 2026, the feminist discourse videos that feel most zeitgeisty are like, women can wear what they want, and it's fine for women to be homoerotic with each other. It really sucks what a full-time job it is to keep up with campaigns against women. And that job is only as hard as it is because those campaigns are already so successful even without bots boosting them. I really think because of the way that misogyny and the misogyny slop ecosystem function, the narrative alone of this driver's license love triangle has poisoned so much of the discourse landscape that Olivia Rodrigo and Sabrina Carpenter will face for the rest of their careers, no matter how much I used to think Sabrina had moved past it. And the way that that narrative and those jealousies and that bitterness from one fandom to another, in spite of whatever maturing the pop stars they love have done in the meanwhile, it might feel specific to the two of them, but it plays out again and again in whatever women the internet can manage to turn you against on another's behalf. And at a certain point, even if it becomes the same sort of full-time job that keeping up with these campaigns become, you have to learn how to say no to them. The thing it doesn't suck is that there's so much fun pop music coming out in 2026, and even if the way everybody is currently reacting to it under fascism is just unendingly miserable, at least there is plenty for us to enjoy and to discuss. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, much of it just really didn't feel like it fit in conversation about either of them individually, and this is a topic I could clearly talk about for hours, as evidenced by the fact that I've done exactly that over the course of this month. Check out the Patreon for bonus content, behind-the-scenes videos, written updates, and the rest of that supplementary video I clipped from here in this one, and to get your name on the screen like these lovely people you see right now. Thank you so much to my Patreon and YouTube channel members for supporting me. Thanks to Bellessa for sponsoring this video. Thanks to everyone who noticed the new editing style last time. I've been having some fun playing around. Okay, I'll see you soon. Love you. Bye.